Elon Musk pretends to be homeless at a billionaire gala. Their reaction leaves him stunned. The night was electric. The grand ballroom of the prestigious Golden Summit Hotel glowed under shimmering chandeliers, and the air buzzed with the sound of champagne glasses clinking and soft jazz playing in the background. It was the most exclusive event of the year, the Billionaire Gala, a gathering of the world's wealthiest and most powerful figures. CEOs, venture capitalists, tech innovators, and aristocrats mingled, exchanging pleasantries and sealing backroom deals worth millions. This year's theme was a celebration of innovation and wealth, and the attendees certainly dressed the part. Men wore bespoke suits that cost more than some people's yearly salaries, and women dazzled in designer gowns dripping with jewels. The atmosphere radiated opulence, a tribute to the success and excess that defined the lives of the ultra-rich. But outside the grand entrance, unnoticed by the valet attendants and ignored by the elegantly dressed guests, stood a disheveled figure. His hair was messy, his clothes were worn and stained, and he carried an old backpack slung over one shoulder. His sneakers were scuffed, and his face carried the weariness of someone who had lived a hard life on the streets. He wasn't just anyone. Beneath the layers of grime and unkempt hair was none other than Elon Musk. Elon stood at the edge of the hotel's sprawling driveway, watching the black-tie crowd glide past him without a second glance. They didn't recognize him. How could they? His usual polished appearance had been replaced by the careful disguise of a man who looked like he hadn't had a warm meal in days. He chuckled quietly to himself. This was exactly what he had hoped for. Earlier that week, an idea had struck him like a lightning bolt. He had been reflecting on the growing disconnect between the world's wealthiest and the everyday people struggling to survive. Even within the tech world, where innovation was supposed to make life better for everyone, there was a growing sense of detachment. He wanted to do something radical, something that would challenge the way people viewed wealth and status. So, he made a decision. He would attend the Billionaire Gala not as the guest of honor but as an outsider, a homeless man, just to see how people would react. And now, here he was, standing unnoticed among some of the most powerful people on the planet. Elon took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. The doorman barely glanced at him before stepping in his path. "Sir, you're in the wrong place," one of them said, his tone polite but firm. "I was just wondering if there might be some food left over," Elon said, deliberately lowering his voice and adding a slight tremble for effect. "I won't be any trouble. Just a little something to eat?" The doorman narrowed his eyes. "This is a private event. You'll need to leave." Elon nodded slowly, backing away without a word. He could feel the stares of nearby guests, some curious, others clearly uncomfortable. No one offered to help or even acknowledge him. He wandered toward the side of the building, where catering staff were bringing in trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne. His stomach growled, not because he was hungry, but because he had skipped dinner for authenticity. He watched as the servers moved in and out, carefully balancing silver trays laden with delicacies most people couldn't afford. "Hey you!" one of the catering staff called out, her voice sharp. "You can't be back here." "I'm sorry," Elon said, raising his hands in surrender. "I was just curious." The woman hesitated, her expression softening. She looked him up and down, clearly debating whether to call security or offer him some food. Finally, she sighed and reached into her pocket, pulling out a crumpled $20 bill. "Here," she said. "Get yourself something to eat." For a moment, Elon was taken aback. He hadn't expected kindness so soon. He took the bill, nodding gratefully. "Thank you," he said. "You're very kind." He slipped the money into his pocket and walked back toward the main entrance, blending into the shadows. His heart pounded with a strange mix of excitement and curiosity. How far could he take this experiment? How many people would look past the disguise and see the man beneath it? The answer so far was not many. Inside the ballroom, the gala was in full swing. Guests laughed and chatted as waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The evening's program included speeches from industry leaders, a live orchestra, and a charity auction featuring everything from rare artwork to luxury vacations. At the center of it all was Charles Wentworth, the real estate mogul known for his lavish lifestyle and ruthless business tactics. Wentworth stood near the stage, surrounded by admirers, his booming laugh cutting through the hum of conversation. Elon had met Wentworth several times before. The man was charming in public but ruthless in private, a master of manipulation who rarely showed compassion for those less fortunate. If there was anyone Elon wanted to observe up close tonight, it was him. Elon made his way toward the rear entrance, where security was slightly more relaxed. He slipped inside unnoticed, blending into the crowd of staff and servers. The warmth of the ballroom hit him immediately, along with the scent of gourmet food and expensive perfume. He wandered carefully, staying near the edges of the room, observing everything. No one recognized him. He passed groups of guests deep in conversation, snippets of their words reaching his ears. Bought another yacht last month. This one's got a helipad. Thinking of investing in a private island? The new art gallery's opening next week. Should be a good place to network. The conversations were a stark contrast to the realities of the world outside these gilded walls. Elon couldn't help but shake his head. He spotted Wentworth across the room, holding court with a group of high-profile investors. The man's voice was loud and confident, his presence commanding. He was in his element. Elon moved closer, pretending to be a staff member clearing empty glasses. He lingered near the edge of the group, listening. And that's why the key to success is knowing your worth, Wentworth was saying. You can't waste time on people who don't bring value to your life. Harsh, but true. The others nodded in agreement, raising their glasses in a toast. Elon chuckled quietly. It was a philosophy he had heard many times before, the cold, calculated approach to life and business. But tonight, it struck a different chord. It felt empty, shallow. Suddenly, Wentworth's eyes locked onto him. The mogul frowned, stepping toward him. "You there," Wentworth said, his tone sharp. "What are you doing?" Elon straightened. "Just cleaning up, sir." Wentworth eyed him suspiciously. "You don't look like one of the regular staff." Elon smiled faintly. "I'm new." Wentworth raised an eyebrow, studying him for a long moment. "New, huh? Well, try not to linger too much. We've got important people here, and I can't have the help distracting anyone." Elon gave a small nod and backed away, his eyes flickering with amusement. It wasn't the first time someone had spoken to him like that while in disguise. Still, every time it happened, it revealed something raw and unfiltered about how people treated those they deemed beneath them. He wandered deeper into the ballroom, blending effortlessly into the background. The grand space was a maze of luxury. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, and the floors gleamed like polished mirrors. He passed a long buffet table filled with gourmet dishes, lobster tails drizzled in herb butter, delicately arranged sushi platters, and desserts that looked like edible works of art. The wealthy guests chatted without a care in the world, oblivious to the outside struggles of ordinary people. It was a bubble, a world detached from reality. Elon knew this world well, but tonight, from the perspective of an outsider, it felt even more surreal. A group of women standing nearby glanced at him, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disdain. One of them whispered to her friend, and they both giggled behind perfectly manicured hands. Elon caught a few words, something about his appearance being out of place and how security must be slipping. He smiled inwardly. These reactions were precisely what he had come to observe. A server carrying a tray of champagne passed by, and Elon snagged a glass. He took a sip, the bubbles tickling his throat as he leaned casually against a pillar, observing everything around him. No one knew who he was. No one realized that the man standing quietly in their midst was one of the wealthiest and most influential people on the planet. It was a strange kind of freedom. "Excuse me, sir." A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Elon turned to see a young woman, her expression kind but cautious. She was part of the waitstaff, dressed in a simple black uniform. "Are you okay?" she asked, her brow furrowing slightly. He tilted his head. "What makes you ask?" "Well," she said hesitantly, "you just seem different from the usual crowd here. And I noticed some of the guests giving you looks. I just wanted to make sure you weren't in trouble." For the first time that evening, Elon felt a genuine connection. Here was someone who wasn't judging him based on appearances or status, Someone who saw him as a person, not a nuisance or an obstacle. "I'm fine," he said, smiling warmly. "But thank you for asking. That's very kind of you." The woman smiled back, though the curiosity in her eyes remained. "If you need anything, let me know," she said before disappearing into the crowd. Elon watched her go, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This experiment wasn't just about observing the wealthy, it was about finding out who still had the capacity for empathy in a world that often valued power above all else. The night wore on, and the energy in the room grew more charged. Guests became bolder, their conversations louder as the champagne flowed freely. The charity auction was about to begin, and a hush fell over the crowd as the auctioneer took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer announced, his voice booming through the microphone, "welcome to tonight's charity auction. We have some extraordinary items up for bid, with all proceeds going to support our foundation's efforts to promote technological education worldwide." The crowd clapped politely, their attention shifting to the screen behind the auctioneer, which displayed the first item, a rare piece of contemporary art. Elon stood near the back of the room, his eyes scanning the crowd. He recognized many familiar faces, CEOs, venture capitalists, and tech entrepreneurs. Each of them was ready to outbid the other, not necessarily because they cared about the cause but because they wanted to showcase their wealth and status. The bids came fast and furious. $100,000 bids flew around the room with ease, accompanied by polite nods and smiles. Elon couldn't help but chuckle quietly. He had attended enough of these events to know how they worked. It wasn't about the items being auctioned, it was a subtle game of one-upmanship. Then, something unexpected happened. The auctioneer paused for dramatic effect before announcing the next item. "Our next experience is truly once in a lifetime. The winning bidder will receive an exclusive, private dinner with one of the most influential figures of our time, none other than Mr. Elon Musk." A ripple of excitement swept through the room. Heads turned, conversations buzzed, and several hands shot up almost immediately. "I'll start the bidding at $50,000, the auctioneer said. "Do I hear 55? 60? A woman near the front called out. 70, someone else added. Elon chuckled softly to himself, amused by the irony of the situation. Here they were, bidding thousands of dollars for a chance to dine with him, and yet not a single person in the room had recognized him standing right there in their midst. The bidding war escalated quickly. Within minutes, the price had soared past $250,000. 300,000, called a voice from the far side of the room. The auctioneer beamed. "We have 300,000. Do I hear 350? 500,000, Wentworth declared, raising his hand with a confident smirk. The crowd gasped, impressed by the bold bid. All eyes turned toward Wentworth, who basked in the attention. The auctioneer paused, his eyes scanning the room. $500,000 going once, going twice. Elon raised his hand. $1 million, he said, his voice calm but commanding. A stunned silence fell over the room. Heads turned toward him, trying to figure out who this mysterious bidder was. Wentworth's face darkened. "Who is that?" he muttered to a nearby guest. The auctioneer, clearly taken aback, hesitated for a moment before recovering. "We have a bid of $1 million. Do I hear 1.1? The room remained silent. $1 million, going once, going twice. Sold. The gavel came down with a decisive thud. The crowd erupted into applause, though many were still whispering, trying to identify the unexpected bidder. Elon smiled to himself, satisfied. He had made his point. But the night wasn't over yet. As the applause died down, the whispers in the room grew louder. Who was this mystery bidder? His clothes certainly didn't match the wealth implied by his $1 million bid. Security personnel exchanged curious glances, unsure whether to intervene or let the situation unfold. Elon remained calm, taking another sip of champagne and leaning casually against a pillar. He could feel the weight of 100 curious eyes on him, but he made no move to explain himself, yet. Charles Wentworth was less amused. His jaw tightened, and his eyes narrowed as he cut through the crowd, heading straight for Elon. The room seemed to hold its breath, sensing that something unexpected was about to happen. "You," Wentworth said, stopping just a few feet away. His voice was low but filled with authority. "Who do you think you are, crashing an event like this and throwing around ridiculous bids?" Elon raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm just a man who appreciates a good cause," he said, his tone light. And it seemed like a dinner with Elon Musk was worth every penny. The crowd murmured in agreement, intrigued by the audacity of this stranger. Wentworth's eyes darted to the auctioneer, then back to Elon. "Security should have removed you hours ago," he said, his voice growing colder. "This event is for serious people, not imposters trying to make a scene." The word imposter hung in the air like a challenge. Several guests edged closer, eager to see how the situation would unfold. Elon chuckled softly. "Imposter?" he repeated, tapping his chin thoughtfully. "Interesting choice of words." With deliberate calm, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then held it up for Wentworth to see. A live stream of his Twitter profile, instantly recognizable with millions of followers and a blue verification checkmark. The crowd collectively gasped as they pieced it together. That's Elon Musk," someone whispered. "No way," said another. "He's been here the whole time?" Elon's smile widened as he lowered his phone. "It seems the imposter is actually the man you were all bidding to have dinner with?" Wentworth's face flushed a deep red. For the first time in years, he was at a complete loss for words. His confident facade crumbled as the realization sank in. He had just tried to humiliate one of the most influential men on the planet. The room buzzed with energy, the tension quickly giving way to astonishment. Guests stared at Elon with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Some of them laughed, genuinely amused by the elaborate ruse. Others looked sheepish, realizing how quickly they had judged him based on appearances. "Well," Elon said, addressing the crowd, "this has been quite the social experiment, hasn't it?" The room fell silent again, hanging on his every word. "I wanted to see how people would treat me if they thought I had nothing. No money, no influence, no status. And what I saw tonight was eye-opening." He glanced around the room, his eyes settling on Wentworth for a moment before moving on. "Some of you were kind. Some of you ignored me. And a few of you, well, let's just say you could use a little more empathy." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the crowd. "The truth is, wealth can be blinding," Elon continued. "It can create a bubble that makes it easy to forget what really matters. Kindness, compassion, and the simple act of treating people like human beings, no matter where they come from or what they look like." His words hung in the air, resonating deeply with many of the guests. Even those who had initially dismissed him couldn't deny the truth in what he was saying. "And as for the $1 million bid," Elon said with a mischievous glint in his eye, "I'll gladly pay it. But instead of dinner with myself, how about we donate the money directly to expanding educational opportunities for underprivileged students? I think that's a better use of the funds." The room erupted into applause, this time genuine and unreserved. Even the most jaded attendees couldn't help but admire the boldness of his gesture. The auctioneer, still recovering from the shock, nodded enthusiastically. "That's a wonderful idea, Mr. Musk. Thank you for your generosity." Elon smiled and took a step back, giving the crowd a chance to absorb everything that had just happened. He could see the gears turning in their minds, some reflecting on their own behavior, others simply reveling in the once-in-a-lifetime experience of being part of a story they'd tell for years. Wentworth, still standing nearby, finally found his voice. He forced a smile, extending his hand toward Elon. "Quite the stunt," he said. "You certainly know how to make an entrance." Elon shook his hand, his grip firm. "Sometimes the best way to make a point is to live it." Wentworth's smile tightened. "I'll remember that." "I hope you do," Elon replied, his tone polite but pointed. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Guests flocked to Elon, eager to shake his hand and share their thoughts on his experiment. Some were genuinely inspired, promising to rethink how they approached their own lives. Others simply wanted a selfie with the man who had just pulled off the ultimate billionaire prank. As the gala wound down, Elon slipped quietly toward the exit. He didn't need to stay for the after-party or soak up more attention. The message had been delivered, and that was enough. Outside, the air was cool and refreshing. He took a deep breath, savoring the quiet after the chaos of the evening. His Tesla waited at the curb, but he didn't get in right away. Instead, he stood for a moment, watching the lights of the city twinkle in the distance. His phone buzzed with a text from Clara, one of his closest advisors. Saw the live stream. Bold move. You made a lot of people think tonight. Proud of you. Elon smiled and typed back, thanks. It felt right. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and climbed into the car. As he drove through the city streets, his mind was already racing with new ideas, new challenges, new ways to push boundaries and make people think. Because that was the thing about Elon Musk. He was never content to live within the lines. He had always believed that the best way to change the world was to disrupt it, to challenge expectations, and to remind people of what really mattered. And tonight he had done exactly that. Elon Musk leaned back in his seat, the quiet hum of his Tesla filling the cabin as he drove through the city streets. The lights of San Francisco sparkled outside the window, illuminating his thoughts. Though the gala was behind him, the impact of what had just happened lingered in his mind. His experiment had been a success, perhaps even more revealing than he had expected. The reactions of the guests, the way some had judged him instantly while others had shown rare moments of kindness, painted a vivid picture of the bubble in which they lived. Elon had always believed in challenging the status quo, but tonight, that belief felt stronger than ever. His phone buzzed with a stream of notifications. News outlets were already covering the story, their headlines sensational and attention-grabbing. Elon Musk disguises himself as homeless man at Billionaire Gala. Sparks debate on wealth and empathy. Musk's bold social experiment. How one night changed everything. What happens when the rich face reality? Elon Musk shows them. Elon chuckled softly as he skimmed the articles. He could already see the debates unfolding online. Social media was ablaze with comments, some praising his ingenuity, others questioning his motives. Finally, someone calling out the ultra-rich for their lack of empathy, wrote one commenter. This is just a PR stunt, another countered. Musk is a billionaire too. What does he know about struggle? But the comment that caught his eye was a simple one. This made me think. And that was enough. That had always been the goal. The next morning, the headlines had spread far beyond tech blogs and business circles. Major news networks picked up the story, dissecting every detail of Elon's experiment. Panel discussions debated the ethics of wealth, privilege, and empathy. Influencers weighed in with reactions, and hashtags like #MuskExperiment and #BillionairesInReality trended worldwide. At Tesla's headquarters, Clara met Elon in his office with a knowing smile. Well, you certainly know how to get people talking, she said, setting a stack of newspapers on his desk. Elon glanced at the headlines. They're talking about it, aren't they? Oh, they're talking, Clara said. Half the world is inspired and the other half is outraged. Just the way you like it? Elon grinned. Good. If they're uncomfortable, it means we're making progress? Clara nodded. The donations to the education fund have already started rolling in, by the way. You turned a $1 million dinner bid into $10 million overnight. Now that's a win, Elon said, leaning back in his chair. But it wasn't just about the money. The real victory was in the conversations happening around the world. Conversations about the gap between the ultra-rich and the rest of society, about the importance of empathy and human connection in a world increasingly driven by power and status. Over the next few days, the ripple effects of the gala continued to grow. Business leaders who had attended the event began re-evaluating their priorities. Some announced new philanthropic initiatives, pledging to invest in education and social programs. Others made quiet changes in how they treated their employees and approached their work. Even Charles Wentworth, who had been humiliated in front of the entire room, issued a rare public statement. Last night was a reminder that we all have blind spots, he wrote. I've taken some time to reflect, and I'm committed to being more mindful and compassionate moving forward. The statement surprised many. Those who knew Wentworth considered him one of the least likely people to admit fault. But it was proof that Elon's experiment had reached deeper than anyone expected. Several weeks later, Elon found himself back at the Golden Summit Hotel, not for a gala this time, but for a quiet meeting with the event's organizers and a handful of key figures from the tech industry. The meeting was held in a private conference room, far from the glitz and glamour of the main ballroom. The atmosphere was serious but hopeful. "I think we've all learned something important from what happened that night," said one of the organizers. "And I believe it's time we do more than just talk about it. What if we turn this annual gala into something bigger, something that really makes an impact?" Elon leaned forward, intrigued. "Go on." Instead of just celebrating wealth and innovation, the organizer continued, "We could use the event to spotlight real-world challenges and collaborate on solutions. Imagine if every attendee committed not just money but time and resources to making a difference." A murmur of agreement swept through the room. Elon smiled. "I like where this is going. Let's make it happen." And with that, the Billionaire Gala was transformed. The next year, it returned with a new name, the Impact Summit, a gathering not just of the wealthy but of innovators, activists, and changemakers dedicated to solving global problems. The event featured workshops on climate change, education, and social justice. Attendees were challenged to think beyond their bottom lines and consider how they could leave a lasting, positive mark on the world. The transformation didn't happen overnight, and there were still skeptics. But little by little, the event began to shift the culture among the world's most powerful people. It became a symbol of what was possible when people set aside their egos and worked together for something greater. One night, nearly a year after the experiment, Elon sat on the balcony of his home, staring out at the stars. His phone buzzed with a message from Clara. "New article just dropped. You're going to love this one." He clicked the link and smiled as he read the headline. "The night Elon Musk changed the conversation. One bold move, one lasting legacy." The article chronicled everything that had happened since the gala. The new initiatives, the unexpected alliances, the countless lives that had been touched. It painted a picture of a world slowly but surely moving in a better direction. Elon set his phone down, his thoughts drifting back to that night at the Golden Summit Hotel. He thought about the curious glances, the whispered judgments, and the rare moments of kindness that had stood out like beacons in the dark. Most of all, he thought about the power of one small idea, a single spark that could set off a chain reaction and change the world. And as he stared up at the vast, endless sky, he knew one thing for certain: the best experiments were the ones that made people think. And in that regard, this one had been his greatest success yet.